Hey there, if this is our first time meeting, I'm Kenny here with Jeremy, and today's question is, does good require evil to exist?
Good evening. Yeah, this is a question. I guess I haven't heard it in a while, but I feel like I heard it a lot in the past. Uh, yeah, you can't have good without evil. It's this kind of balance that we just assume, and it comes from some more sensible things. So people say things like, "Oh, well, you got to take the good times with the bad times, right? If you didn't have the good times, then if you didn't have the bad times, then the good times wouldn't be as good." Like we think in contrast, and so. Uh, Good needs evil to exist, I guess, is what we pull from that. But falls apart philosophically pretty quickly because the real problem here is that we're saying because we need to know what evil is in order to know what good is. Otherwise, you wouldn't have any idea of what good is. There would just be good, and there would be no category for this at all. If you want to know what good is, you have to have something to compare it to. There has to be something. Evil has to exist if you want to know what evil. If you want to know what good is. Yeah, I guess that's not necessarily true, but we'll grant that. And but that still doesn't say anything about whether good needs evil to exist or not. That just tells us whether or not we can know what good is with or without evil. It's one thing to say like, oh well, I can't know that this is good because there's nothing to compare it to. It's another thing to say that good has to like depend on evil. If evil wasn't around, then there would be no good things. Like that. That's a huge jump.
If you were to like ask the question a little bit differently, I mean, when we're talking about evil, is it its own thing or is it an opposition to good?
Oh, like how do we define this? Right. So like, good or evil is the absence of good. And then, well, what would we mean by good then? What do we mean the absence of evil?
Right.
That just means our definitions are really scrawny and ineffective. Self-referential anyway. A strange loop, as it were.
The reason why I say that is if evil is its own thing, I'm pretty sure you can say that good and evil can coexist and not coexist at the same time. As in, there can be good without evil if it's something that's if it's its own entity. But if it's a opposition, for example, the lack of good is evil. If you want it to go that route, then you can't. I mean, you can't have good without evil because evil. I mean, it's a little different because it would be like not a ratio, but the amount of like the level of goodness, right? For example, level 1 goodness or minimal goodness versus maximum goodness, and you can't go the other side, right?
Yeah, and well, actually, this question of definition is pretty important as well because when we're talking about this, we have just this vague idea of what we mean by okay, this is a good thing, and so we need good things. But this is we also need bad things to counter the good thing. It's just I don't know what that would be. What's the substance of good? Like when we talk about light and darkness, that's a little bit easier to think about because we okay, light is around when darkness isn't there, but you don't. But they're not necessarily their opposites. When we look at light, that's a thing. There's a thing to look at. There's photons, there's energy, but when it's not there, and you have darkness, that just means that
it's a description of a lack of lack of light, right? So it's like
lack
darkness
of light.
is actually it's not a thing. It's just it's the lack of light. Same thing with I think cold and heat. So heat is a thing, but cold is not a thing. Cold is just the absence of heat. So the colder you get, just means you have less heat, right? Same thing with the light. So does good and evil, does it go in that scale type of thing, or is it something different? As in, there's a good act and a bad act. I guess it depends on the context of what we're talking about, right?
Can you actively introduce evil into a system, or are you just taking good out of it? Maybe you could think of it more concrete in terms of like organization and chaos, but that's really just one manifestation of good and evil. But either way, it works out. I guess you might say you introduce chaos, but ultimately I think that you're just subtracting order. Then in that regard, order is the thing that has existence, and the chaos is really the lack of it.
Right,
Augustine,
right.
is it Augustine? No, yes, I don't remember. I think it is Augustine that that describes evil this way, where it's basically like, well, evil is nothingness. There's nothing there. Uh, it's a lack of good, and when good pervades everything, then evil doesn't exist. Good still has its substance, still has its existence, but uh, evil at best is just a corruption of good things, and that's a
Well, if you talk about the corruption of good things, isn't that itself its own thing,
yeah. See,
right?
that's the thing, is it has there's a non-entity to it. Like, you have let's see if we can think of a nice concrete example. You can make a nice car, right? You buy yourself a nice car. We'll call that a good thing provisionally. I don't think that there's too much controversy out of that. You get yourself a nice car. It works well. It runs well. And if it did that for the rest of time, we would say this is a great car forever and ever. But it happens that time has its effect on things, and so it wears down in different ways. And we go from this kind of maximal good, this 100%, and then slowly there's a decay. Chaos is introduced to the organization of that system. But that's ultimately it fading, the thing itself. It stops being what it used to be and starts just dribbling into
So it's no longer good. That's what you're saying.
yeah,
The
it
car.
stops
Yeah,
being
I
good.
see.
Yeah.
So is evil akin to I guess depreciation or
Yeah, I mean that's what that's yeah, we have this kind of category of the existing things, the light, the goodness, or the organization. And then their opposites aren't really their opposites. They're just when those things slip away for one reason or another. Um, yeah, does that make sense?
oh
Because we've kind of been
yeah,
going
no that
back and forth between these
right,
dualities
right,
here.
right. Right. So I think it really depends on the context of the good and evil we're talking about. If we're talking about acts or something that's physical, but it wouldn't be considered the same way as we are talking about it now because it's more, I guess, a little bit more abstract, right? For example, like I know you use the car as a physical example, but that physical example doesn't really translate to real, like, I don't know, because the goodness would be like if we were to put it into a different terms, it would be like either one car, two car, three car in that way, as in the more cars you have, the more good it is.
Is that
Like
more
you
good?
understand
Yeah.
what I'm saying? That's another way of like looking at it,
Mm.
right? Which wouldn't work in our framework, or at least the framework that we just talked about. But like, I mean, or we can use it in terms of quality. Instead of like depreciating, we have like a 2000 like a 2001 Civic versus a 2020 like Ferrari or something. So that would be
Right.
more good versus the least good would be like the beat up car. But I guess then you can kind of go like sub that, meaning like you have a car that never runs and just sucks in, repair bills. I mean,
Yeah.
at that point, I think it no longer ceases to be a car, right? Like if it doesn't, I mean, okay, now we're getting off a little off topic, but if a car does not drive, no matter how much money you put into it, does it is it a car
Is it a
or is it
car?
a like you know
The
what I mean?
essence of things. Uh,
Right, car
hmm,
does it cease to be a car as soon as it's
right.
not repairable and it cannot drive? Like, does
So
it
there's
become is
a
it a car?
yeah. Is a Hot Wheels car a car? Does that count as a car? So
It's
this
a
actually,
replica, right? So it's not a
it's
car.
a replica, so
It's
it's
an imitation.
categorically a different thing. So that's the thing, is ultimately this comes down to our categories. Ones that came up with names for things and put them in categories and said, well,
Mhm.
these belong here. The I think it's a camp you would call the essentialist that would say there's an essence to car, and if it does these things, then we'll call it a car, and that has something to do with like what it is and what it is not. But when it comes to what we actually call it, I don't know. The essences seem to kind of drift away. There's an essence to our cat, and say, well, this one doesn't run, but it's not designed to run. It's meant to be. It's been retired, right? Like you can go see historic cars and vehicles that don't run anymore, but they wouldn't stop being cars. But like, you're walking by with your kids, and you're like, "Oh, look at that car." If you said anything else, look at the
Noun
replica of
versus
that car. Like,
yeah, it's a noun. It's no longer The name, it's the name of the, it's, yeah, it almost becomes a name of itself. Like, oh, look at that car. It's not referring to its drivability, but rather for its value and perceived value, I guess, in
Yeah,
terms
and
of
what do people
collectible.
think it is?
Right.
Yeah, where
But
and this gets into some pragmatic linguistics and stuff like that. People will draw the line between the word and the thing, right? I say that this is a car, but the car doesn't know that it's a car. The universe doesn't know that we've gone and like divided everything into categories. There isn't actually an essence of car floating out there somewhere.
yeah, the
Those are just
reason
words
the
for
yeah, the reason why I brought it up is because we talked about cars and cars no longer being good by, I don't know, like
Oh, that's right. We
after
had
so
other
many
things to
years,
get to.
right? Right, right.
Uh-huh.
So to be consistent, I just wanted to put it out because, like, if it's a money pit, and for example, if it's taking you thousands of dollars to fix it, and you can buy $1,000 car that does not require that, do you keep on pumping money in? And then is that the reason why it's bad or evil?
Right. Well, that brings up some other
Right.
questions of why you would want a super nice car, and some of it's comfort, some of it is status, and so I'd probably look into those places. Like insofar as those things are considered good and they're being uh, threatened or detracted from based on the car that you're driving, maybe there's a certain evil in that. Because if you go, well, evil in this temporary sense that we're using here, if it's not a good car, then I guess an evil car. They're just anyway. We'll say bad. That's a little less
Wow.
moral.
Okay. So wait. So I'm confused now. What is good? Because we're the antonym of good is sometimes evil and sometimes bad, and they're not the same thing.
Mhm. Yeah, so in this case, I think we'd be looking at two different types of good. So there's the good in the moral sense, and that would be opposite evil. But when we're talking about a good car, there's no real moral there. We're just saying it does what it's supposed to do really well, and anything that's
Ah,
bad is
so
going to be
the
it's a
things that it
quality,
doesn't do, right?
it's whatever it is. Yeah, does it
So
get? See,
so
that's a utilitarian way to put it, but it's easier to do that with objects than with morals.
right. So a car that no longer functions to drive is a bad car, not a not car. In your,
Yeah,
I guess in this
well, is it a
case,
bad? It's a bad car insofar as it's not being a car, right? So it's losing its carness, as it were, because it's stopping to
no,
function.
no. Okay, so if it functions even a little bit, even with repairability, then it's a bad car. But soon as it's not repairable, I mean, okay, yeah, that's a bad
It's not
question
even a
because
car anymore. I would know. I guess
no,
it's
no,
interesting.
no, because anything can be refitted. It's just it's the time and effort. It just becomes inefficient. For example, you can like how people make anything out of everything, right? Like you
Right.
can make computers out of toasters or or
Yeah.
a cardboard cardboard PCBs. Like it's possible to fix any car. Just put a new like you just gut out everything and put everything new in, right? So or
Mhm.
anything that's working in. So that would be bad. I'm talking about like oh wow, this is getting deeper. Yeah, no, like it doesn't make because okay, I just defeated my whole purpose. Like because it's technically it is possible to make anything a car.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I rest my case. I've been totally
End of
there's
story.
nothing like yeah. I mean, technically, if you want to, you can have a bad car, but you can't have no car. I mean, obviously feasibility and stuff like that comes into play, but then that does not ultimately makes does not make a car a non-car anymore because at this point you can epoxy uh, pencil crayons and then make a car out of it.
Uh-huh.
It's true. You probably seen
Yeah.
those videos where people
Yeah.
make
Yeah. Yeah.
guitars out of anything, right? So it's the same
Hmm.
thing, long as it. I mean, I don't think that I wouldn't consider that restoration or anything, but
Hmm.
it can be done.
I mean, it kind of just depends on how I want to say this is a postmodern thing. How loose you want to get with your definitions, because you really don't have to worry about going through and repurposing it and trying to fit the form of a car, because we have an idea of what it should look like. But say it looks completely different, but it does the same thing. Would we still call it a car? I mean, if someone was like,
We
if I bring
call
up,
we call a pencil crayon guitar a guitar.
yeah, so that gets the job done, and that's been made into that image. But you could also
Right.
think of something like, oh, well, here's a skateboard. This is the worst car I've ever owned. It's
Oh, I
it doesn't
see.
have an engine, and it. You
But
just kind
yeah,
of decide, well, I'm going to put this in this category and evaluate it based off of that, the standards that belong to that category, and you come up with certain results. A skateboard doesn't do super well. A truck probably
wait.
does
So
even
so
better.
does the skateboard identify itself as a car? The pronoun is a car
Identify
or not?
itself. Are you a
No, no, no. If
car?
the skateboard, you know,
Mm-hmm.
if it can it self-identify? Oh, I guess it's an inanimate object. But
Doesn't have a
if we were
self.
to put like a soul in it, if it were to identify itself as an automobile, or maybe
Yeah,
the name of the skateboard would be car, like
would be
CAR. That would
yeah,
be the
yeah.
name
So
of the
like you could
skateboard.
imagine like printed on the bottom in
Yeah, exactly.
ornate
Car.
letters like they
That's
do.
the
It says
exactly.
something
Then
like
it's technically a
this
car.
car sucks.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
No man.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, you label
the
things and you put it in a category, then you evaluate them based off of that label, and you come up with certain results. That's really what I think that comes down to. So for when we're talking about cars, and if we're defining it by function, like does the car stop functioning as a car over time, and then when it stops working entirely, we'll call it something of like a non-car, or I guess a bad car at the very least. But then we could also say that a skateboard car, because it never
but
was meant
is it
for
a car? I
what do
don't
you
know
call
if you can
it? It has
categorize. You
trucks.
can't.
At least there's
No,
that.
but that because okay. So for example, if a cart stops doing certain functions, for example, the
Mhm.
brakes stops working. It doesn't run on an engine anymore. That's a skateboard, kind of, right? I
It
mean, where
becomes a
do we draw the
skateboard. Yeah.
line? No, I mean, like, say they. I mean, the similarities between a skateboard and a non-functioning car that rolls down the hill is.
Yeah.
I'm not saying identical, but there is a lot of resemblance, and it does share a lot of features and characteristics. So is
Mhm.
that mess of a machine a
Skateboard.
skateboard?
Yeah. So I guess that brings me
You can
basically.
ride on top of it. It's just
Yeah,
you have a
you just
car
put
in
it on.
neutral and just go on
Like,
top of walk on top of it and roll
yeah.
it down the hill. I
Yeah.
mean,
Can't really
I
have
mean,
tricks on it. Well, maybe you can.
you
Um.
can go up a ramp and to the moon.
Mhm. I guess that's what that brings us to the bottom line is with this kind of thing when it comes to the essences. Um, Reality is what it is, and the categories that we make up are just useful for whatever it is that we're using them for. Why is it helpful to say this is a car, this is a skateboard? Because if you went to I don't know, if you were graduating from college and your parents were like, "Oh, we're gonna buy you a new car," and you come home and it's like a nice skateboard, you'd be a little bit disappointed. But ultimately, the cars, the skateboards, they don't know what they are. The reality doesn't have these categories built into it. They're just the ones that we make up, and it works pretty well. We need them. We need to
So
use them, but they're not
so as soon as
intrinsic.
right. So if it's no longer pragmatic, then it no longer becomes useful to us, meaning that all the categories that we use are essentially not part of the thing because they're not
Yeah,
pragmatic.
they wouldn't be. They're not essential to the thing. That doesn't mean that our categories are bad or that they're not useful. Sometimes we come across things that we change. Language evolves over time,
Also,
as
a
do our
lot of the things
categories.
a lot of the things that we have, they're defined by laws, I think. Like, so,
Mm,
I mean, fundamentally, the car, if you drive it
mm,
over to Canada or the States, it's a car, right? But by
mm.
legal definitions, it's not always the same. For example,
Right.
crimes, right? Like different
Hmm.
crimes exist. There's different penalties. For example, if you had like a um uh, I don't know too much about guns, but like for example, if you had guns, there's like unrestricted firearm, restricted firearm. Those would be different. Like the definition of those weapons would be different if they're
Hmm.
weapons at all, depending on how you define it. Would be different based on where you live. So how does
Right.
that come into play with all this?
Right. Laws is a good place. I think patents are another place where this gets really messy really fast. Like between nations and stuff like that, because you have to patent things in more than one country in order for it to be respected as such. And the way that they define different components of a thing, you'd have to rewrite your patent for certain things. I don't know. I haven't
Oh,
looked into it.
there's design. There's two types of patents, at least in the United States, or at least this is kind of general. So there's either utility patents or design patents. So utility patents, they're
Mhm.
usually based on they both have different criterias and like how long they last. They're different for utilities
Mhm.
and things. So utilities are like the main like function of the patent itself, and design patent is the design of it. So let's say I had a tissue, like wet tissue, you know,
Okay.
wet tissue or whatever. So I can patent the fact that these are flushable wet tissues, or I can design it and then no one like if I so utility would be that
Oh,
I
I
had
see what you mean.
a
Yeah, yeah,
disposable patent
yeah.
like for flushable wet wipes, or the design would be like a Nike brand or whatever, or like
Yeah.
the shape of the shoe. So it really depends. Like and I think the duration of them vastly differs too. I think utility patents are a lot shorter than the design
Yeah.
patents. But
Mhm.
yeah, utilities like it's probably a lot harder processes to get through because it yeah.
You're right. Yeah. That is interesting though, dividing it.
Imagine if you patented like shoes, like footwear. You can't. Nobody can wear shoes.
Things
I
that
mean
go
that
on
would
your
never
feet.
happen, right? Right? Because
Yeah.
they expire a lot quicker. But yeah, but that's
I
how they
think in this
protect.
you have to go out of your way to design something. Well, more than just you're coming up with the utility. What can it do? Uh, and then to be able to patent. I feel like there's enough patents and designs out there. It'd be really hard to find something that was that general that within the next like 10 years, like everybody needs it. And one guy's got the patent for this thing that's
Usually for the utility, it's an improvement on like other things that are already
yeah, something that's
created
already
for
done.
a vast amount. Yeah, so it's like, for example, your trash can lid. You know how it opens, like the pneumatics or whatever. Like if you have
Mhm.
a better way to do it, you can like patent that, and then you have like 3 years or whatever. I forgot. I think it's 3 years and 10 years for design. I don't know that. I don't. That's just right off my head. It's probably
Uh-huh.
wrong, but like for like if you had a utility, then like no one can come up with that mechanism, or at least they can. Then you can sue them from their revenues or profits or whatever, probably revenue. But yeah, so like you have a very limited time to get it out to the market.
Hmm. We could tie this into our last thing. So, like, imagine you were talking about trash cans. So, if we have like a trash can that was just a perfectly good functioning trash can, and it's like the best at what it does, maximal goodness for this trash can, and then somebody patents a better version of it, and then that trash can comes out, and we consider them both trash cans. The one that was perfect, now there's something better than it. So, does that mean that it became lesser, even though you did nothing to it? It used to perfect, then something else came along that was better. So then
So I don't
what
think I
happens
don't
to
think the
this goodness?
previous. I think the 1.0 would not be perfect if there's improvements based upon it. It was good enough, I'd
We
say.
found out that it was just good.
So the perfect must be a noun. It's not an yeah. If the perfect was a noun, then it would be okay.
Okay. Like if that's the name of the trash can, the
It's
perfect
yeah,
trash can,
exactly. But if
brand.
it's a description of what it was, right?
Right.
Perfect. It would not satisfy.
Right. Because there's another one that
It's
came along that was
perfect.
better.
That was better. Yeah. Or I guess it also depends on uses. There's only one use case for Oh, actually, there's two. It's one to throw out your. No, wait. Okay, let's think of what are the use cases for garbage. One is to throw out things that you don't want, and two is to keep whatever within it in itself. I mean, because like a lot of people sometimes they don't like. It depends on what type of waste you're throwing out.
Hmm.
You might not require a lid. For example, if you had like papers or something, but if you had like rotting food, you kind of want a lid or. Oh wow, this is getting complicated. I'm
Yeah, perfect for what?
overthinking.
That's the
Yeah.
other thing is we have like the most good, but that's ultimately not what we use it for. Usually, it's more useful when you're thinking in terms of utility and like I need something that does this. Oh, this is perfect, even if it's like dirty or even broken in some places. If it serves the purpose like perfectly, does it without any inefficiency, whatever that's defined as, then you could call that perfect. But otherwise, if we're talking about like the best thing possible, that's purely theoretical. There's no way you could produce something that's like the the quintessential best thing, and then know for sure that nothing good can ever come after that.
Right. Because then you would because you would always have either a bias or you have constraints. I mean, your
Mhm.
restriction of your limitation of your own knowledge, right? So
Yeah.
wow, that's So when we go back to the question, does good require evil to exist? When you answer yes or no, it's just relative, isn't it? If you want to put it that way.
That one, I don't know. I think that one's a distinctly a philosophical principle because, like with these things, we go back to like the trash can, or really any product. Ultimately, you take a product and decide, well, this is good. And then something better comes out that you decide that this is bad now, but it was good until something else demonstrated that it could have been better some way. So it's in comparison, but that didn't make the thing, I don't know, worse. It didn't actually become worse. The thing is what it is. So the goodness in that regard is just a category, and then bad is only meaningful if you're comparing two different categorically similar things. That was a lot of
Do you know the
philosophical
Likert scale?
the light card scale.
It's like
What is it?
I think it's like it's a scale going from like very good, good, adequate, bad, very bad. Like you know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, that kind of thing.
Right? Like it's like when you do like a survey, but like for evil to not exist in like categories of or whatever what how good the trash can are, it has to be perfect, better than perfect,
Right.
or
Yeah. Then you're going
perfect
off.
over, yeah, more perfect than the last
Yeah.
perfect one. That would, yeah, does that even make sense? Or because like the first one would be, it would have been good, it would not be bad, right? Because if it's like really good to begin with.
Yeah. It's not like it becomes bad. It might be considered bad in comparison to something that comes out like 200 years
But
later
it's
that
not
just
bad,
floats down
is
the
it?
water.
Or
It's
is
not
it
bad.
bad?
Well, so what do we mean by actually? So this is probably, if anything, demonstrated that we probably should have been clear with definitions from the very beginning. Because if you say good and evil, you are talking about morals, and those are considerably different things.
Wait. Okay, so I'm gonna throw a curve one here. Well, I don't know if it's a curveball, but if you saved 100 people, that's a good thing, right?
Yes.
Or I guess out of like earthquake or whatever, you've ship. I mean, you put 50 people on a boat. Now, if you put 55 people on a boat, is that a good thing?
Is that like a
You
better thing?
Well, it's a good thing. We know that, right? Now, is it
Right.
is it better than the 50 versus the 55, or is the 55 better than the 50?
Okay.
Is
So
it
this.
any better? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So
So
is
you
is the
almost
50 any worse? If the 50 is worse than 55, which some people say that that's not, they're
they're
that's
both
not,
good
it's not
in their own way.
exactly, they're both good. So you can't have one better than the other. Like,
Yeah.
so so if you're saving 50 people and if another person saves 55 people,
Hmm.
are you evil?
Are you evil by comparison? Are you more evil? Right. That's why this idea of
Right.
putting
Is
good and
it is
evil on
it
a
bad, or
continuum.
okay, not even evil? Is
Yeah.
it bad now? Is it worse than
Yeah.
saving 55 people?
Yeah. Oh, that does
Oh
bring up
man.
the parable of the tenants, where you've got the master's going away, and he gives his money to these servants to handle
Oh
them, and then
yeah.
the one guy who came back with basically what he gave him because he sat on it and didn't invest it. The master said he was evil. So
Oh wow. Oh wow. Well,
that's
wait. So
weirdly.
so we're supposed to invest? What?
Oh yeah. So if you're not invested, that is another thing though,
Oh
because we could
wow.
look into economics for this. Isn't there a whole thing about how, like, if you're not growing as a company or as an organization, you're actually shrinking. You're going backwards. You have to continue to
Right.
expand.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I understand that. Yeah. It's like if you're stagnant, then you're dying. That's what they
Yeah.
usually say.
And so that's actually
Yeah.
moving in the opposite direction. And then you're pushing something in the opposite direction. I think we could call that. Could we call that evil? I don't know.
Oh wow.
This one's hazy. Then in that case, we could talk about evil being anything that's antithetical to good, not to where you need good evil. You don't need evil for good to exist. Good is what it is. But once you start attacking anything that is good, maybe that's what we mean by evil. That sounds a little bit clearer.
Right. Yeah, no, like if you were to say that if evil is the absence of good, like we said before, then the 55 person, by comparison to the
Right. It has to be a
50,
little bit
yeah,
more evil
yeah,
than the
exactly. So wait, no, because like you can't answer it both ways at the same time in all situations. That's what I think right now, which I usually don't do because I think usually things are absolute.
other.
Usually, I mean, even if it's theoretical, it's absolute. Like if it's good and evil, if it's based on certain principles or if they have certain laws that dictate
Mhm.
if they are like, for example, if you use the lack of good is evil, or
Mhm.
if evil is another thing. Like if you were to I mean, if you were to pull that out, extrapolate it, and use it again here, I mean, I think we should use the same principles. So, if I mean, in the Christian spirit, a lot of the times, evil is expressed as the lack of goodness or lack of godness per se. So it's something that's apart from it. Like for example, we're using the light and the darkness. So by
Mhm.
that definition, saving 50 people is in fact evil.
Mhm.
Using
Wait,
the same standards if you want to be consistent.
saving people as opposed to saying saving like an infinite number of people or something like that.
Or yeah, well, anything greater than 50 for that person.
Anything greater than 50? Okay, wait, is good. And then what about like saving 25 people is
It's evil. It's evil because someone saved 55 people.
so it has
Anything
something
under
to do with like
55 would be until another person comes up that in the similar same situation save more people, then that 55 person
mhm.
or saver of the 55 would be considered evil.
Okay, then 75. Some guy comes and saves 75. Now he's
Right, by
once
comparison,
this much
because
up
it's a like it's like being cold or there's less light and it's darkness. If there's something that's brighter or stronger, something that's outside of
Mhm.
that's better than you, then everything else by comparison is more evil because
We
it's
should
not good,
probably
not as
reduce
good.
the complexities to this because like the one problem with just doing like a number of people, saving a number of people, makes it look as if that's really a metric like by itself. So like usually if you
Oh,
save
no, yeah,
55
this is
people,
asinine. I know.
yeah, so like if you were talking about saving 55 people, maybe there's like a maybe there's like 55 people on a boat that are about to crash into a bridge that needs to be lifted up, but the guy was like distracted and then he looks over he finds out that they're about to crash into the bridge and he presses the button. People are saved because he did his job right. That's technically saving, but not that heroic. Meanwhile, if you have like a kid who like saves a dog from the like a big foot caught on the train tracks or something like that, and he like cuts it really close and risks his life and saves his dog, that seems to be
Or you cut.
the greater
Uh,
act because
I don't.
there's more at stake. Go
Have
ahead.
you seen the video clip of like a train conductor and how he sacrificed his son to save like the train or something
This
going over a
sounds,
bridge?
yeah, I've definitely heard the story.
Yeah, and then like I think like the moral of it was like Jesus or something. I don't know. I don't know where people did it. It could have been from a movie. I don't remember, but I've seen it in Spears where they try to explain what God did for us, and I was just like, oh
Oh yeah,
man,
that kind of
that's
thing.
so
I
stupid.
wonder if
If God like, but you know what I'm talking about, right? But no. I've seen it like literally dozens of times within the Christian
uh-huh.
Spirit where they like included in a PowerPoint presentation of like this is God's love for us, and like there's this
Yeah.
train. You know the story or no? Or
Mhm. I do. I don't know. I don't even know if it's true. I've heard it passed around so many times. It's always in
yeah,
Christian
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like
literature.
I like so it's pretty much like for people that probably never seen it. It's a train conductor and the train was going over. It has passengers in it and then the passengers inside there's a whole bunch of different people, but they were not aware of, them heading to their doom, right? Cuz well the reason why they're heading to their doom is I think there was like a bridge or something like that and
Like a
and then
bridge
it was
up.
open. Yeah. And then they need to close it, but something was wrong, I think.
His son's
And
playing
in
on
order to,
the bridge.
right. Yeah, yeah. No, and so in order for okay, no wait. Okay, so something was wrong. So like they could have manually put the bridge down or something like that. So the little kid
Mhm.
goes inside and then manually does it, but he gets crushed by all the like the he had
Oh,
to do
that
it
sounds
manually and then he got
even more
crushed.
Christian. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Uh-huh.
like so he died and but then like the train goes by and like everyone's doing what they're doing
Everyone's
and
fine.
like
Yeah.
they're not aware, but that's what like Jesus. I'm like, no, that's not what he did. But anyway, but it's just it was like very cliche type of thing, but it's like it's pretty sad. But
I do wonder
yeah,
if it's a true story because it sounds like there's a philosophical category for these. They're called troll problems, And it sounds just way too much like that, and then just engineered for the like perfect
Right, right.
Christian audience. And then it's always delivered like really well by some pastor that's trained this kind of thing, and it's moving and it gets its job done. So I guess fine, whatever. But yeah. What were we talking about? Something about good and evil. Can good exist without evil? The answer is yes. There. Write that in your philosophy paper.
Does good require evil to exist?
Oh, that part. No, it doesn't require good to exist. It exists on its own. Evil is trying to stop evil, or trying to stop good, I guess. Is that the last thing that I said? I don't know. I'm glad that this is not my thesis defense. That's my bottom line.
Yeah. It's one of those questions where you can't answer it without having additional questions to it, just because it's
because it's so vague.
It is very vague.
All of our questions, all the halfway decent ones, are the ones that we're like, wait, what are we even talking about?
Yeah, we don't even.
And with that said, I think we're super out of time for this week. So until next time, we'll see you next Monday. Take care, y'all.